The courtroom wasn't cold. But his hands were. Arnold sat still as the wooden box was placed on the table. No one looked at it, except his daughter. She gave a slight nod, and then looked away. 3 generations had touched that box. One filled it. One almost burned it. One refused to open it. This is the story of a silence passed down, and the letter no one was supposed to read. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The courtroom wasn't cold. But his hands were. Arnold sat still. The oak table in front of him reflected a faint, sterile glow from the overhead lights. The nameplate beside him, Arnold K. Defendant, was angled perfectly, untouched. Then the door opened. No one stood. No one clapped. But everyone shifted. Maria entered, her steps slow, deliberate. In her hands, wrapped in linen so old it had softened to the color of ash, was the box. It wasn't large. It didn't need to be. The sound it made when she set it down, wood on wood, was not loud. But it arrived inside the room like a final sentence. Across the aisle, Catherine Saturday. The daughter. Her posture was precise. Spine upright, fingers interlocked over her lap, chin slightly raised. But her eyes were the only part of her that moved. They drifted down to the box. Stayed. Then met his. Arnold didn't blink. Catherine gave the slightest nod. Then looked away. Not in contempt. Not in forgiveness. Something quieter. A distance that had already been walked. He felt it land in his chest like an elbow from the inside. And then, for the first time in hours, Arnold moved. His shoulders rose. Just a little. His right hand left his knee and hovered near the edge of the table. His torso shifted. Almost rising. A reflex not rehearsed. The beginning of a gesture. But then his left hand gripped the wood. Tighter than needed. And he sat back down. No one noticed. Except the girl on the end of the second row, whose sketchpad trembled just slightly as she traced the shape of his hand. Maria remained standing. Not by the witness stand. Not near the attorneys. Just next to the table, facing no one. The judge adjusted his glasses, shuffled a paper. The gallery was quiet. But not still. The way an auditorium waits during the space between an overture and the first note. Arnold glanced at the box. Only once. He didn't need to see it. He had memorized every scratch, every seam. He remembered the way it had once smelled like pine, then paper, then nothing. It had been filled. Then forgotten. Then almost burned. Now returned. A possession no longer his, but still his responsibility. Mr. K, the clerk said. You are not required to make a statement. He nodded. Said nothing. From the back row, a camera shutter clicked. Maria flinched, but didn't move. Catherine hadn't looked back since. Arnold studied her, his daughter, like one might study the sky during a funeral. With the quiet need to find a sign, but the fear of asking for it aloud. She wore grey. Not black. Not blue. No symbols. No medals. No cause. Her expression was glass. Clear, shaped, but impenetrable. She had not come to listen. She had come to be there, and to leave. He wanted to stand. Not to speak. Not to apologize. Only to shorten the distance. But again, his hand stayed. And so did the silence. A bailiff cleared his throat. Someone shifted a file. But the center of the room, the air between the box, the man, and the 2 women, remained untouched. And then, something happened. Small. Private. But it fractured the frame. Maria reached out, not for the box, but toward it. Her hand stopped just above the linen. And rested there. She wasn't touching it. But her fingers trembled as if they were holding the weight anyway. Arnold noticed. Not the movement, but the pause. He closed his eyes. Just once. Inside his head, a voice he hadn't heard in decades said, "If you forget who you are, let this remind you." He didn't remember if it had been Maria who said it. Or someone else. Or himself. But the echo came with the box. And the echo stayed. Across the room, Catherine shifted. Just her foot. But it broke the alignment of her entire frame. She stood, smoothed her coat, picked up nothing, and walked out. No fanfare. No turn of the head. Just a daughter walking out of a room with her father in it, and not stopping. Arnold watched her go. He did not rise. Did not call her name. But his fingers curled, just once, against the underside of the table. Not in anger. Not in grief. Something older. A man's body remembering what it once meant to try. And then, just as the judge opened his mouth to call recess, Arnold looked at the box again. Only this time, his eyes didn't stop at the box. They lifted. To Maria's hand, still hovering. To her stillness. To the empty space where his daughter had been. And then the line of his shoulders changed. Just slightly. He wasn't smaller. He wasn't larger. He was still Arnold. But the room was different now. The box had arrived. But not the reckoning. And silence, for the first time, wasn't just something endured. It was something inherited. The coffee was bitter. She didn't add sugar. Not because she liked it that way, but because it didn't feel like a day for sweetness. Maria sat across from him. A quiet diner. Morning light came in through slatted blinds, leaving angled shadows across the table. She touched the rim of her mug, then let go. Touched it again. Let go again. Arnold didn't speak. Not at first. He placed a small object on the table between them. A wooden box. Unpolished. No carvings. Just a simple brass latch, dulled at the edges. He didn't push it toward her. He just left it there. She looked at it. Not long. Just enough to see it wasn't an accident. Arnold's voice arrived slowly, like someone testing if it still worked. If there comes a day, he said, when I forget who I am, he stopped. Not dramatically. Not nervously. Just paused. Maria didn't move. When I stop being the man you first met, he continued, I need you to give this back to me. The words hovered for a moment, and then fell somewhere behind the clink of a spoon 2 tables away. Maria smiled. But not warmly. Not with pity either. It was the kind of smile you give a person who just told you they believe in ghosts. I'm not sure I understand, she said. That's fine, Arnold replied. Just hold it. Until I do. She nodded slowly. The box made a soft sound as she lifted it, wood brushing against laminate. It was heavier than it looked. Not physically, but in the way it rested in her hands, as if it wanted to be dropped, but wouldn't forgive her if she did. She didn't open it. Instead, she turned it over gently, then ran her thumb along a seam where the lid met the base. There was no lock. Only a latch that could be opened by anyone. But something in the room made it feel sealed. Maria looked at him. He wasn't looking back. He was staring through the window. Not at anything. Just through it. If I ever try to take it back too soon, he said, still facing the glass, don't let me. Maria tilted her head. How will I know it's too soon? Arnold turned to her now. For the first time since she sat down. You'll feel it, he said. Then nothing. Just the sound of a bus going past. A woman at the counter asking for napkins. A fridge behind the kitchen coughing once. Maria slipped the box into her bag, carefully. It didn't fit neatly. One of the corners jutted out awkwardly, forcing the zipper to stretch around it. They didn't hug when they left. Arnold walked her to the sidewalk. She stepped down. He didn't. They exchanged a glance, just one. And then she went. But that wasn't the end of it. Later that night, in her small apartment, Maria stood at her kitchen counter. The box was on the table beside her, just where she'd placed her bag. She hadn't touched it again. She made tea, but didn't drink it. She turned on the lamp, but then turned it off. The light felt too bright, too present. Instead, she walked over to the table. Sat down. The box hadn't moved. But it felt like it had. She reached for it. Stopped. Then reached again. Unlatching it made no sound. Not even a click. Just the lift of brass against brass. She opened it halfway, then closed it. Not from fear. Not from respect. But because something in her had whispered, not yet. Not hers to open. Not yet. She took a pen. Wrote a date on the inside of the lid. Just a date. Not to mark the day she received it, but the day she agreed. Agreed to keep something for someone from themselves. And in that moment, the box became more than a gift. It became a place where a soul was kept safe, from the person it belonged to. The courtroom air was too still to breathe. Not quiet. Just paused. A lawyer from the plaintiff's side stepped forward. His shoes echoed like punches. He didn't clear his throat, he wanted the silence. "Let the record show," he said, tilting his head just enough to imply contempt. "This is the same man who stayed silent from 2003 to now." A ripple passed through the gallery. Not gasps. Just that communal exhale people do when they believe they've been told something obvious. The lawyer kept going. No apology. No acknowledgement. And now, he wishes to withhold a letter. As if silence has become his property. Someone whispered, "He's cornered." Arnold sat still. But one hand tightened, on the edge of the oak table. He didn't blink. But his knuckles went pale. The lawyer circled back, hands behind his back. "We are not here to judge his career. We are here to ask, what gives him the right to hide what could be evidence of motive, compensation, or guilt?" He paused. "Isn't that what this box is about?" Maria flinched. The lawyer's hand gestured, openly now, toward the wooden box. She wanted to say something. She didn't. Instead, her eyes went to Arnold's right hand, still gripping the table. Still white. The judge said nothing. The courtroom wasn't sure if this was the climax, or the beginning. The lawyer leaned forward. "Let me ask plainly, sir." He turned fully to Arnold. The cameras adjusted. A light caught the left side of Arnold's jaw. "Why did you never speak? Why now?" Silence. The lawyer nodded, self-satisfied. "Of course." He turned his back, but not before delivering the final line. "Sometimes, silence isn't noble. It's just convenient." A few heads nodded. Others hesitated. Arnold's lips parted, just slightly. Maria saw it. So did Catherine. But no sound came. Instead, his hand, lifted from the table, just an inch. As if reaching. Then it closed. Slowly. Back into a fist. Not in rage. Not in defense. In restraint. The room didn't catch it. But Maria did. She took in a breath, almost imperceptible. But she didn't interrupt. Because she understood something now. This wasn't about silence being broken. It was about silence being chosen, again. Because if he spoke, if he defended, if he explained, he'd have to use words that no longer belonged to him. Words his father once taught him to guard. To protect. To carry. Arnold didn't move again. Didn't respond. But the weight of the room shifted. Not because he won. But because he didn't try to. And that confused them. A man accused, a name resurfaced, a scandal repeated, and still, he didn't fight back. The cameras waited. The public wanted a headline. Maria looked down. The judge finally cleared his throat. "We'll proceed." But in that moment, under the buzz of unseen tension, something happened. Catherine's phone lit up on the gallery bench beside her. She didn't check it. But the lock screen showed a name. Gustav. A group chat. A scheduled reminder. But Arnold saw it. Just the name. A name spoken silently, when no one else was speaking at all. The envelope was thinner than it looked. No seal. No stamp. Just a faint line of faded blue ink along one edge, as if someone had once held it too tightly with fingers not yet ready to let go. Arnold sat alone in the hallway outside the courtroom. One hand rested flat on the bench. The other hovered above the envelope, not touching it. Not yet. He waited for the hum of fluorescent lights to steady. It didn't. They buzzed. Like a fly trapped behind glass. Then, with a slow breath, he picked up the letter and opened it. The paper resisted at first, creased into the memory of its last fold. Inside, the handwriting appeared. Bold. Angular. Not elegant. Not rushed. The kind of script that said, this was not meant to be rewritten. You have to be harder than the world, Arnold. If you want to lead, you must not ask to be liked. The first line didn't sting. It echoed. Like something he'd told others, before ever reading it himself. His eyes moved down. I taught you discipline, not affection. Because I believed softness was a kind of betrayal. The words didn't apologize. They explained. And somehow, that hurt more. He turned the letter slightly to catch better light. The crease near the middle had worn thin. A single letter was fading, the S in softness, barely there, as if even the paper resisted it. When your mother passed, I did not hold you. I stood like stone at her funeral. I wanted you to see how not to collapse. A pause. Arnold shifted his weight forward. Elbows on his knees. Still holding the letter with both hands. Still reading with the posture of a man who could not afford to look broken. I thought strength would pass through silence. That by saying nothing, I was saying, survive. The hallway stretched long in both directions. No doors opened. No voices called. Only the sharp clack of a distant heel on tile. And even that faded. Arnold returned to the letter. But strength is not silence. It is knowing when to speak, and when to listen to those who have no voice left. The ink shifted here. Lighter. Slower. The last paragraph had a tilt. Like a hand not fully confident in what it was saying. I thought the roof was enough, that sheltering you was loving you. But what good is shelter when you don't ask what storms it holds back? He stopped reading. The page was still half full. But the rest could wait. He closed his eyes. Not to reflect. But because something behind them pulsed. Not pain, not memory, just pressure, like a dam that had held too long. He opened his eyes. Maria had stepped out of the courtroom. She saw the letter in his hand, did not speak. He nodded to her without expression. She held the door open. But did not wait. Arnold looked back at the final lines. You became a man without asking me how. And that is my fault. I gave you rules. Not reasons. The final sentence was shakier than the rest. I am not proud of how I taught you to be proud. Arnold folded the letter, not precisely. The creases no longer aligned. And that felt right. He reached for the wooden box, then paused. Instead, he slipped the letter into the inside pocket of his suit. Over his chest. A place not designed for carrying weight, but memory. He pressed it once, palm to heart. Not with emotion. With ritual. Then he stood. The hallway lights flickered once. But he did not look up. Maria had disappeared back inside. He walked slowly to the doorway, then stopped. There was a mirror along the wall. It caught him from the side, half in shadow, half in the hard white of institutional light. And in that moment, he saw not the son of Gustav, not the father of Catherine, but a man, alone with a letter from someone who had never said "I'm sorry" out loud. And perhaps never needed to. Because some silences, when spoken late enough, become prayers. He stepped back from the mirror. No adjustment to the tie. No breath check. He had been undone. And that, today, was its own form of preparation. Arnold returned to the courtroom. Not taller. Not straighter. But quieter. He did not hold the box. He no longer needed to. The letter was not a lesson. It was a confession that arrived too late to teach, but just in time to unteach. And that made it worth keeping close. The paper was already on the table when Maria entered. She didn't ask how it got there. Didn't ask why the room smelled faintly, barely, of something long since burned. She just stood at the edge of the wood, her fingers resting on the back of a chair she did not pull out. The courtroom was in recess. No judge. No jury. Just overhead light and the low hum of forced air. Arnold sat across from her, hands clasped, elbows in, gaze on the paper, but not reading it. Maria spoke first. Quietly. "Is that the one?" Arnold nodded. Maria stepped forward, slowly. Her heels didn't echo. The carpet swallowed every sound but her breath. She leaned over. Not to sit. Just enough to see the edge of the paper, the bottom left corner curled slightly. Blackened. Crisped. A burn that hadn't finished its job. She didn't touch it. "I thought you burned it," she said, almost to herself. Arnold didn't flinch. But his hands pressed tighter together. "I almost did." The pause wasn't dramatic. It was dry. Flat. Factual. Maria finally sat down. The paper didn't move. The corner that was charred, she noticed it had stopped short of the last sentence. The ink there had bled slightly. Not enough to erase the words, but enough to make them hesitate. She looked up. His voice came before she asked. "It was near the stove," Arnold said. "I was holding the match. It caught fast." He didn't blink. I watched it climb up the side. Halfway through, I was ready to let it go. He unfolded his hands. For the first time, Maria saw it. A faint line, barely healed, running diagonal across the knuckle of his right thumb. Pink. Tight. Not fresh. But not yet gone. And then Arnold looked at her, not past her. "You said something. That day. At the door." Maria tilted her head slightly. He continued. "You said, if our daughter ever asks, let her see a man who kept his word, even when no one was looking." He tapped the edge of the paper, not hard. "I thought I could forget it. Let the paper disappear, let the promise go with it. But your voice came back." Maria leaned in. Her hand hovered over the page. The smoke stain curled toward the center like a question that hadn't been asked yet. "You stopped the fire," she said, softly. Arnold nodded once. "Bare hand." Maria didn't speak. She looked down. A breath held. Then let go. She lifted the paper gently. It was fragile. Heat had weakened the grain. As she turned it toward the light, the ink shimmered just slightly, where the moisture had blurred it. She ran her finger near the edge, not touching the burn, and stopped at the final line. It was still legible. "I will not ask to be forgiven. But I will not lie about what I did." She read it aloud without voice. Then looked at Arnold. "I thought the strongest part of you was the part one couldn't reach." He said nothing. "But it's this," she continued, holding up the scorched confession. "This is the part you didn't hide. Even from yourself." Arnold's shoulders didn't lift. But his eyes did. Just slightly. Maria stared at him. Not with anger. Not with softness either. Something in between. The look of someone who has stopped trying to understand, and has started to witness instead. The fluorescent light above them buzzed again. This time, neither of them looked up. Maria placed the paper back on the table, precisely where it had been. Then, after a long silence, "You kept it all these years?" Arnold nodded. "Where?" He didn't answer immediately. Then tapped twice, just above the heart pocket of his jacket. "Close enough to remember. Far enough that I wouldn't use it as excuse." Maria blinked once. Then, slowly, her fingers traced the line of the paper's edge. "It still smells like it," she said. "Like what?" She looked up. "Like fire that didn't finish its job." Arnold didn't move. Maria stood. Her chair made no sound. She didn't adjust it. Didn't straighten it. At the doorway, she turned. "Next time someone asks what made you stop," she said, "tell them it wasn't guilt." He raised his head. "Tell them it was heat." She didn't wait for a response. Arnold looked down at the paper again. There was a curve in the middle now, from where she had lifted it. It hadn't been there before. A quiet dent. He smoothed it with his palm. The charred edge crackled. Just faintly. Like something still smoldering. The studio wasn't loud, but it was lit like a crime scene. Overhead panels, square, surgical, pushed heat onto skin, not warmth. The desk was glass. The host's cards were crisp. His suit perfect. And Arnold sat in the center chair. 1 foot flat. One hand resting on the wooden box. The other, unmoving on his knee. There were 5 cameras. Only 1 red light. But all of them watched. A pause. Too long for a program. Too short for an escape. The host finally smiled. It wasn't warm. It was procedural. "We're back with Arnold Schreiber," he said, turning slightly to the audience that wasn't there, only lenses. He continued, tone rehearsed. "A man who hasn't spoken publicly in 16 years. Until today." Arnold didn't blink. The host leaned forward, elbows just inside polite. "You've said nothing, since the file, since the tape, since the vote." A pause. "And yet now, you carry that box into court. You speak by not speaking. You gesture without answering." He lifted a single cue card. "The public doesn't like riddles, Mr. Schreiber. So let me ask plainly." He held the card close. "Didn't read it. If you stay silent now, people will believe you're hiding something." His eyes narrowed, just slightly. Would they be wrong? The room held still. Somewhere, a mic buzzed. Quiet, ambient, omnidirectional. Its sound was like breath without lungs. Arnold looked down. Not away. Down. To the box. Then the table. Then the empty space where a nameplate might have gone. He let a breath out through the nose. Eyes still low. Then, only then, he looked up. And said nothing. The host tilted his head, not out of curiosity, out of reflex. "Mr. Schreiber." Another pause. Not dramatic. Just undecorated. Arnold's mouth opened. Not wide. Just enough to be human. Then closed. Then opened again. Barely. And his voice, when it came, was not cracked. It was flat. Like paper on a table. "I choose," he said, "to let them think I'm wrong." The host blinked once. Arnold didn't stop. "Because if I speak, only to appear right, then I'm not." He didn't elaborate. Didn't cite values. Didn't reach for virtue. The host waited. A chuckle nearly escaped, but didn't. "So, you're admitting guilt." Arnold's shoulders didn't move. But something behind the eyes stiffened. "I'm admitting," he said, "that protecting my own image would cost more than letting it collapse." The host leaned back slightly. There was a monitor behind them, on delay. Arnold's profile glowed faintly. The host reached for a follow-up, but the red light on camera 3 blinked. Time was up. No one clapped. No one smiled. Even in the control booth, no one reached for applause. Arnold remained seated. Still. Still with the box. Still with the same hand flat on his thigh. Still with the same cut across his thumb, barely healed. The host shuffled his cards. A cough, somewhere offset. "Thank you, Mr. Schreiber." Arnold stood. Not fast. Not slow. He didn't shake hands. Didn't reach for his coat. He picked up the box, the burn mark visible now, caught by the lighting angle. And he left the frame. No outro. No summary. No music. Just a room that still hadn't exhaled. The courthouse hallway had emptied. But the bench by the vending machine still held one man. Arnold sat alone, the wooden box resting beside him, not clutched, not displayed, just placed. A coat lay folded on his lap, untouched. A single light overhead flickered, not out of malice, just age. He hadn't checked his phone all day. But it buzzed. Just once. He didn't reach for it right away. He looked at the machine across from him. Chips, candy bars, water bottles. All organized by code. No surprises. No memory. You pressed A4, and you got A4. Then he opened the message. "If you're still there, I didn't go back in. I wasn't ready. But I read it. His letter. The end part, I didn't understand it all, but I want to. Not today. Not from a stage. When I ask you, someday, I want you to be the one who answers. He read it once. Then again. But the words didn't change. Only the weight behind them. There was no punctuation after the K. No full stop. He looked at the box. The lid was still slightly ajar. Not open, but not closed either. A whisper's width of space, just enough to remind him it wasn't sealed. He had brought it out that morning, knowing it might never return to the closet. The clasp no longer held tight. The grain had darkened from years of skin and air and silent company. It had been passed between hands like memory in wood form. His fingers hovered above the lid. Not to open it. Not to shut it. Just to sense the boundary. Inside were things he remembered. Things he forgot. And one thing he nearly destroyed. The folded paper with a singed edge had curled again, the way old things do when they remember being near fire. A darker corner where flame had kissed but not conquered. Maria had placed it back with a tremble in her fingers, as if setting down not paper, but proof. He didn't look around. No one was there to see. No applause to risk reframing. He slid the box toward himself. Then paused. There was a seat beside him. Empty. He looked at it like one looks at a question not yet asked. Not with fear, but with the understanding that answers cost time. And sometimes, silence was the most honest payment. His thumb ran along the edge of the lid, once, then twice. Not caressing. Just checking if it still knew how to close. It did. But he didn't press. From across the corridor, a janitor passed by. She didn't say anything. But she paused a moment, looked down at the box, and nodded once, perhaps mistaking it for a lunch container or an old briefcase. Perhaps not. Arnold nodded back. Then she walked on, pushing a cart that squeaked in perfect rhythm with a day ending quietly. The message on his phone remained open. He reread the final line. When I ask you, someday, I want you to be the one who answers. He let the phone dim in his hand. Didn't lock it. Didn't archive the message. Just let it rest. The hallway smelled faintly of old varnish and the kind of coffee no one refills. He thought of Gustav. Not the strength. The silence. He thought of Maria. Not the laughter. The pause before she said, I'll keep it. He thought of Catherine. Not the turn of her face in the courtroom, but the space she left by not coming back in. A silence had been passed down. But maybe not inherited. Maybe just held. The box stayed on the bench. Unopened. Unsealed. Waiting. Arnold stood, slowly, as if gravity had aged since morning. He picked up the box, not with urgency, but with the care of someone who knows what can remember pressure. He looked back at the empty seat. Still empty. Then he walked. Not fast. Not slow. Just enough to remind the floor he was still here. As he reached the doors, he heard the message tone again. He didn't look. Some words didn't need repeating. Not when they'd already been heard. Outside, the sky had no verdict. Just clouds. Just wind. And a day that had, for now, said enough. He didn't open the box. Didn't close it. He carried it.